Hi, everybody. Welcome to the BSB Bookathon Fall Edition. We are excited to have you join us today. But I want to go ahead and welcome the authors who are joining us here today. And before we get started with our readings, which I'm really excited for, I'm going to ask our authors to go ahead and introduce themselves to you and just say who you are and what it is that you write. And Jane, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Hi, I'm Jane Walsh, and I write queer historical fiction, specifically Regencies. I'm a debut author with Bold Strokes Books, and my first book, Her Lady to Love, is coming out in November.
That's exciting. So happy you're here. I'll go to Maggie next, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Cummings. I live in New York, right outside of New York City. I write primarily romance. I'll be reading today from Bulletproof, which is my 7th novel with Bold Strokes Books.
Awesome. Glad you're joining us. Andrews and Austin, if you could introduce yourselves.
Andrews, Austin. We write primarily romance, mystery, and a lot of paranormal mixed in.
So quite a mixture. That's awesome.
Yeah, we just often do a sort of quasi-political book at one point, and it's just something different. So we cover a lot.
Fantastic. I love the variety. That's great. And Justine, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm one of the historical writers at Bold Strokes Books, but I think I probably am the go-to author for World War II. I've written 6 novels about it from every conceivable, well, not every conceivable, but from many perspectives. So that I'm the war gal.
Well, I'm a big fan of historicals myself, so I'm thrilled that you are. I think we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our readings. I should tell you who I am because I did neglect to do that. My name is Melissa Brayden, and I'm a contemporary romance novelist. I think my stuff is kind of fun and flirty with a little bit of angst. Some books more than others, but you know how it goes. We're going to turn to Maggie to kick off our readings today, and she'll tell us a little bit about what book she's reading from, and then you can just jump right into it, Maggie.
Sounds great. Today I'll be reading from Bulletproof, which is right here. Bulletproof is my new release. It comes out in November. The main characters are Dylan Prescott and Brianna Logan. Dylan is a detective. She's a new detective, and she's just been assigned to investigate a very serious narcotics ring. Brianna Logan is the prosecutor on the case. Both women are very interested in advancing their careers, and since this is kind of a pivotal case and somewhat high profile, they decide not to act on the mutual attraction that is very much present from the moment they meet. That promise or that agreement lasts not a minute. They immediately hook up, and the day after they hook up, they basically avoid each other at the office for the entire day. At the end of the workday, they agree to meet at their local coffee shop and sort of talk out what's going on with them. And that's the scene I'm going to be reading from right now. So, about last night, Brianna started. Dylan almost hoped to avoid the topic entirely. She knew why. Her gut told her Brianna's standoffishness today was the first baby step to putting a stop to any future extracurriculars. The thing is, Dylan, I just don't think we should let that happen again. Dylan nodded stoically. I knew you were going to say that. I am sorry about avoiding you today, Brianna said. Brianna leaned forward and touched her knee. In the past, these interactions had meant desire. Right now, the gesture signaled sincerity, and it was amazing the dismal effect that difference had on her entire being. I wasn't lying when I said I was busy today, Brianna said. She took a deep breath. Nonetheless, my behavior was immature, to say the least. I don't really have an excuse for that. Dylan wanted to suggest that it was possible Brianna's conduct was her subconscious's way of telling her she didn't want to be mature, that deep down she didn't want to make the decision that was right on paper. Her body and soul wanted to splurge, to indulge, but even in her own head, it sounded like an appeal. You're awfully quiet over there, Brianna said, taking the first sip of her coffee. I don't really know what to say, Dylan said. I disagree with you. I think you know that. But what's the alternative? Was Brianna really asking that? It seemed so straightforward to her. We take it day by day and see where it goes. I know you think it's that simple. It's not, Dylan asked. Brianna paused, taking a long second to consider her answer before speaking. I think, as women, particularly working in male-dominated fields, it's foolish of us to assume we wouldn't be judged, and treated differently. Don't you think people talk about us already? Dylan asked. I mean, because we're strong and independent women, not to mention queer? Yes, of course, Brianna said. I'm sure there are people who talk about you for being an out lesbian and criticize the way you choose to present yourself. Undoubtedly, people consider me loose for openly identifying as pansexual. Not that the haters even understand that label, she said. But that's not what I mean. Brianna took another sip of her macchiato. I guess what I'm saying is that we can't dictate the things people will judge us for that are beyond our control. I am who I am. You are who you are. But we shouldn't add fuel to the fire by doing something that, while not strictly verboten, is arguably unprofessional. I'm an assistant U.S. attorney. You're the co-case detective. Brianna had a valid point, and Dylan hated it. But what about our feelings? Dylan asked, even though it made her vulnerable. Dylan, I like you. Obviously, I'm attracted to you. Brianna chewed her bottom lip. If you had any doubts about that before, I'm pretty sure last night put those to rest. As far as feelings go, I think that's where we can take it one day at a time. If real feelings develop, they'll keep. Until after the case is done, Dylan asked. Ideally, yes. Dylan sighed. The fact that you make so much sense is very annoying. You know that, right? Dylan took a hefty sip of her latte, letting Brianna's message sink in. She still didn't wholly agree with the approach, but she could at least respect the ideology behind it. Hold on a freaking second. Brianna stared at Dylan's paper cup and then lifted and inspected her own. She spun it all the way around on their shared table before dropping her jaw in disbelief. What's going on? Dylan asked. Brianna pursed her lips and pointed at Dylan's cup. She put a heart on your cup. The barista put a heart on your cup. Dylan waved her off with a laugh. I mean, it's probably her signature thing. Well, I don't have one. See for yourself. Brianna offered her drink for inspection, but Dylan pushed it away. You know, you sound a teensy bit jealous, Dylan said. It was true, and Dylan reveled in it, even though she knew she couldn't expect anything from it. For now, just knowing was enough. I mean, it's a little rude, Brianna persisted. I'm sitting right here with you. Do you want me to go yell at her for insulting you? Dylan asked. My non-girlfriend, my boss. What is our relationship exactly? She teased. Brianna thought about it for a second. We're friends. Friends who had one super hot, amazing hookup. Now we work together to put bad guys in jail. We sound like a TV show I would actually watch, Dylan said with a laugh. Right? Brianna echoed. Dylan loved Brianna's silly laugh and her real smile. It was just a bit giggly and oddly goofy for such an attractive person. So we're back to normal? Dylan asked. Whatever that is, Brianna said with a laugh. That's you and me and coffee. We talk, we laugh, we know there's something here. Dylan waved between them, but we don't act on it. That's our normal. To our normal then, Brianna toasted her with her drink. Dylan didn't miss a beat. I'll drink to that.
I don't know. I think they're going to act on it. That's fantastic. And what a great opening line about last night.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So check out Bulletproof for sure. You can see the link off to the side on the chat bar. That'll take you straight to that sale. And thank you so much, Maggie, for that fantastic reading. And we are going to pivot now to Jane, who is going to be reading from her debut novel.
So I'll be reading from my debut, Her Lady to Love, available on November 1st. So this is a Regency historical, and if you're not familiar with the Regencies, they are set in early 1800s England. And if you like kind of the Jane Austen era, beautiful women in ball gowns, a lot of scandal and gossip and flirtation, then I think you'll really enjoy this. So this is the story of a shy wallflower, Lady Honora, also known as Nora, and a popular party girl, Miss Jacqueline Lockhart. So 1 week ago, they bumped into each other on a ball, quite literally. Nora bumps into her. Nora has bought a pair of dance shoes to, like, as an apology basically to Jacqueline. And now it's 1 week later, and they bumped into each other again, this time at the opera. Miss Lockhart tossed those gorgeous locks of hair so they fell against her bosom. Several interested pairs of male eyes looked their way. The opera is always a bore, she pronounced. I would do most anything to forget that we are at such a tedious event. Nora narrowed her eyes. I think it's exhilarating. Aren't you fresh from the country? Miss Lockhart asked. I expect most things are entertaining when you have so little to compare them to. Miss Lockhart's father returned, and handed round the drinks that he had been so kind to fetch during the intermission. Relieved, Nora took her glass, eager for the courage that the wine might lend to her, and spilled the entire cup on her dress. With a horrified gasp, she watched the red wine soak into the white satin like blood. The opera could not have provided more drama than she felt at that moment. Faintly, she stammered an excuse and hurried away, cheeks flushed, before her aunt could chaperone her to the retiring room. Nora sat on a low stool and examined the damage to her dress, a feeling of helplessness stealing over her. But she had fled with as much intent to compose herself as to fix the stain. So she sat still, took a deep breath, and tried not to crumple her satin skirts in pure frustration. How embarrassed she felt on an evening that had promised so much. Lady Honora, are you quite all right? Nora sucked in a sharp breath. There was Miss Lockhart, stepping through the door, looking like a vision in a pale blue gown that floated around her curves. Her stomach dropped. She had not had a single drop of wine to drink from her spilled glass, but her head spun as if she were half a bottle in. Miss Lockhart, thank you for your kind attention, she replied. But it's a stain, nothing more. You needn't have left your admirers. And the second act should be starting soon. Well, that's no reason to hurry, Miss Lockhart replied with a grin, and flung herself into an elegant chair. I can hear the music starting up again, so you've already missed a part of it. Personally, I plan to stay here as long as I can, maybe even for the duration of the entire second act. That soprano is dreadful. Nora struggled to remain her usual composure. Well, if you wish to return, I'm sure the gentlemen can distract you from the stage. Oh, them, she said dismissively. Gentlemen are as common as grapes on the vine, and that lot was nothing special. Miss Lockhart's face brightened, and Nora felt several degrees warmer by the light in her eyes. By the by, thank you ever so much for the dance shoes, Lady Honora. I received them last week, and they are quite the prettiest pair in my wardrobe. Nora was flustered. Oh no, the dance shoes! The note! Panicked, she tried to remember what she had scribbled in the shoe emporium 1 week ago. Nothing personal, nothing intimate, she recalled with relief. Nothing had been put into writing that she truly wanted to say when she looked at Miss Lockhart. Nora swallowed and said, I simply wanted to express my regret at having damaged your own pair. Well, it was unnecessary, Miss Lockhart assured her, but I think that's the hallmark of the very best kind of gift. Those slippers deserve to have an exquisite dress made just for them, which will give me a reason to visit my modiste again, so I really must thank you. This was only friendship, Nora told herself. A heartbeat passed and Nora spoke. I should return. My aunt will be wondering where I am. Lady Mildred must know that you're here in the retiring room. Where else would you be? Besides, the longer that wine settles into the fabric, the less chance you have to remove it. Come, let's try to fix it together. Nora looked at her in alarm. Oh no, please, don't trouble yourself. But Miss Lockhart was already applying herself to her supple leather gloves. She worked the pearl buttons free of their looped buttonholes and peeled the gloves from her hands, freeing finger by finger. Nora's mouth went dry at the sight of those beautiful hands, narrow and slender. There was a basin of water on a low shelf for washing up. Miss Lockhart reached out her bare hand to clasp Nora's gloved one and pulled her to her feet. She tugged her over to the basin as if her touch didn't crack through Nora with a thunderclap of physical awareness. I think we shall get the stain out in a trice, Miss Lockhart said, and she dipped the fabric in the basin and rubbed at it, bending low over the skirt with industrious effort. Nora looked down at her glossy raven hair and its elegant array of curls and was close enough to smell her perfume. Orange blossom. She inhaled, savoring the scent. After a moment, Miss Lockhart looked up. I should have confessed something, she said. I've never done this before, and I don't think I'm helping. They looked at the white satin, which now sported a large water stain. Instead of fading, the red wine spread, slowly but surely. They looked at the fabric, then at each other, and all of a sudden both of them were laughing and laughing. Miss Lockhart wiped tears from her eyes and took a deep, steadying breath. Well, your maid can spend tomorrow morning soaking your dress, providing that I haven't done irreparable damage. We should go now, Nora said. We've really been here long enough, and my aunt will be on edge if I'm unchaperoned. Miss Lockhart rolled her eyes. I'm sure your aunt doesn't expect you to be up to no good in the ladies' retiring room of all places. We don't need a chaperone here. But the crackle of awareness remained, and they locked eyes. Nora remembered her gaze earlier when they were sitting together during the first act of the opera, and was quite sure that she was not the only one who felt the pull between them.
Yay. Thank you so much for that reading. A lot can happen when there's not a chaperone, so.
Gotta be careful.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for those no chaperone moments. But that was a fantastic reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, and we're going to move right along, and we're going to toss it next to Andrews and Austin, who will be reading from their newest.
Okay, this is a story about a gal named Ray Starr, who moves back to Oklahoma to start a writing school for young girls on a ranch there. And she isn't there very long with her lover before her lover leaves her for someone else. And now she's stuck in Oklahoma. She's in debt, she has a new business, and certainly she's not very trusting going forward of any love relationship. She's always dreamed that she was going to buy the ranch next door to the one she has and put them back together as they once were. But of course now that's not possible because she has no money. And that's further exacerbated because 4 different people have bought the ranch, none of them knowing anything about ranching. They've destroyed the land and she just can't tolerate what's going on over there. And today is the day she finds out that idiot number 5 has bought the ranch that she desperately wants. The storm had moved past and a coolness had settled over the ranch. So I plopped down on the porch swing that faced west to enjoy the peace and quiet and the magnificent breeze that sent a chill up my arms. Cal rounded the corner from the stables. Cal is her riding instructor. Ellie in tow. Ellie is her young barn help. I could tell from the excitement playing just below her eyes, where the skin crinkled up when she was amused, that she was relishing whatever information they were about to drop on me. Well, Ellie went over there and met our new neighbors, Cal reported. So somebody bought the place. I sighed forlorn. Well, not exactly bought. Tell her, Ellie. Ellie cleared her throat as if about to give a high school presentation. Well, the new owner is Miss Jane Barrow, cutting horse champion, and she won the ranch in a poker game. Sounds like we're going to have to rename that ranch the Double or Nothing, Cal said. I vaulted out of the swing and landed 2 feet in front of Ellie, who jumped back. Some damn cowgirl won that ranch in a poker game? Not just any damn cowgirl, Missy. Cal loved to tease me. Jane Barrow. You should look her up. She was something in her day. Oh, in her day? So she's some old lady who's going to turn the place into a retirement home for busted bronc riders? Ellie rattled on at a rapid pace. She said she was going to follow me back here because she wanted to meet you in person because she could tell from my visit that you were the type who had a lot of questions. Cal dragged Ellie away before she could end up in my blast furnace. I was known for having a short fuse, which I tried to mature out of, but so far I wasn't making too much progress. I had a whole lot to be short-tempered about. I'm trying to run a damned writing school in the part of the country where crazy right-wing Jesus freaks wear God loves you t-shirts while stealing everything that isn't bolted down. Every old guy wants to know if I have a husband because how else could I get the money to buy a ranch? And that's before I have to deal with prepubescent little girls and their menopausal moms, and now this with the ranch next door. Now, Ray, you get worked up every time it changes hands. They won't be there long. None of them stay, so save your blood pressure, Cal said calmly. Do you know how many times I've planned and plotted to figure out how to buy that spread, if for no other reason than to keep more weirdos from buying it? And now weirdo number 5 has beat me to it, and not even with hard-earned cash savings. No, it was some half-assed cockamamie poker game. How can anyone value something they want in a damn poker game? I said to Cal's backside as she headed for the barn, but mostly I was just venting into the air. Before my steam had subsided, a big tricked-out black King Ranch SUV pulled in through the open ranch gates, drove down the winding road, and parked just south of my office in front of the barn. The door opened, and a tall, elegant woman dressed in black stepped out. She closed the door gently behind her, and in the sunlight, I could see she had large, graceful hands that allowed her to wear an extra ring on her index finger. The ring glittered in the sunlight like trophy jewelry. Her black boots were silver wing-tipped. The shoulders of her tailored shirt were silver trimmed, and her shiny silver hair was brushed back just visible under the edge of her cowboy hat. I'd never seen a woman look so good in a cowboy hat. She tilted her aviator glasses down so I could see her eyes and said in a nice alto tone, "You must be Ray Starr." She extended her hand. "I'm Jane Barrow." She gave me a grin that damn near knocked me over. I kept looking into her eyes, which were absolutely gorgeous. "You're a little bitty thing," she said. "You run this place all by yourself?" "Size isn't a measure of incompetence," I said back. "True," she said good-naturedly, seemingly amused by me, which made me bristle. "Since I'll be your neighbor, I thought I'd stop by and say hello. We plan to run cutting horses, work with semi-pros who want to turn pro. I heard you had your share of city folks moving in, so I wanted to set your mind at ease. We do know ranching. My ranch former is Wiley Evers. He's a good man. He can help you out if you ever have any need for an extra hand in an emergency. Hope you'll stop by and pay me a visit sometime." Did you really win that ranch in a poker game? I couldn't bother to even work up to the question politely. I was too irritated that I wasn't the new owner. I did. "I'm willing to take a gamble when I find something that's worth it." She winked at me. "Nice to meet you, Miss Starr." Then Jane Barrow touched two long, elegant fingers to the brim of her hat, got in her SUV, drove slowly down the ranch drive, heading south to her place. Now that is one sexy damn woman. I wonder how old she is. I went into my office, Googled Jane Barrow, cutting horse champion, and found several dramatic shots of her on horseback, going back 2 decades. Won at a championship event in 2015 when she was 45. So she's 50 now. It was hard to believe the woman who got out of that SUV was 50. Well, good. I let go of any romantic notions about glamorous cutting horse champions. Good that she's 50.
I love it. I love it. And what a great line. One sexy damn woman. Not to mention weirdo and idiot number 5, which is a great categorization as well. So thank you guys so much for sharing that reading with us. And Justine, I'm going to come to you next and tell us a little bit about your book and give us your reading.
Okay, well, it is To Sleep with Reindeer. And you can see here is the reindeer. Here is the reindeer. And here are the people sleeping. So my World War II stories are always based on real events, and the scene that I'm going to read to you, the whole book is based on real events. The scene I'm going to read is copied step by step from the real event, and it borders dangerously on plagiarism, but it's a historical event, and the only elements that I added that did not happen are the women, the lesbians. This is a mission by the Allies to invade the hydroelectric plant in Norway, which was making heavy water under the auspices of the Nazis, which was going to be used for creating an atomic bomb. If you don't want to read my novel, you can go see the movie. It's called The Heroes of Telemark. There's no lesbians in the movie. In this scene, the saboteurs have climbed down into a gorge and climbed up the other side to the hydroelectric plant where they carry out their mission. The plant's engines thrummed as if the mountain itself vibrated, while the rush of water through the enormous feeder pipes added a tone at a higher pitch. It was so loud they could talk without fear of guards hearing them. The thunderous industrial noise seemed at odds with the Arctic night, where thin clouds slid over a bright moon. They descended one side of the deep gorge, crossed a barely frozen river, and climbed the other side toward the plant. And now they all crouched together behind a shed. Kirsten, one of the Norwegian, felt Marit, the Sami woman, at her shoulder. "Look, however it turns out, I want you to know I'm happy to be doing this with you, even if we don't make it." "Me too." She was interrupted by the order for the covering party to move forward. But before rising to join them, Marit pressed a sudden kiss on Kirsten's lips. Kirsten's demolition party scuttled toward the generator building, to where the diagram told them was the service entrance to the electric cable conduit. When they found the ladder in the deep snow, they scrambled down to the opening. Oh, shit. Kirsten was sure the others thought the same. They had all just assumed the cable conduit entry was a pipe tall enough for them to crawl through on their knees. It was not. The cement conduit was packed with a dozen crisscrossing steel cables. They could move forward only on their stomachs, dragging themselves over and around the lines, foot by foot, pushing their packs ahead of them. And she was in front, If she met an obstacle, she couldn't turn around. The last man would have to wiggle back out again, feeling his way in the dark with his feet, with everyone following him backwards. In the freezing, wet, thundering dark, it was the stuff of nightmares. She took a breath and started in, shoving the flashlight into her collar to free up both of her hands. Foot by foot, she crawled, slid, wiggled, and hauled herself along cables covered with oil, her gloves constantly slipping. To hold off claustrophobia, she thought of Marit, standing guard outside. Marit, who had joined the mission out of friendship. Marit, who had just kissed her. Behind her, the men grunted and cursed, and in spite of her own misery, she worried about them. They were bulkier than she was, and all of them hauled sacks filled with explosives. They carried sidearms as well, and canvas holsters, and hers kept catching on cables, yanking her to a halt. She lost all sense of time, and existence seemed to shrink to the single task of inching along the conduit. Then, almost by surprise, they reached the aperture that led to the high concentration laboratory. Mercifully, it was large enough for them to fit through. Removing the cover screen, they dropped in one by one. The din of the factory machinery covering their boots, thudding on the tile floor. She exhaled with relief. They had arrived, and so far not a drop of blood had been shed. In front of her, Kirsten saw a hall of glassy cylinders in rows along both sides. Each cylinder was connected to a maze of pipes and wires and was jacketed in steel. These were the precious heavy water cells. They were rather beautiful. The saboteurs went to work, placing the soft plastic explosive coils around each cylinder. After all 18 were enclosed, the men attached the long fuse, and Kaiser signaled for them to gather at the escape. Footsteps on the stairs sounded, and all of them drew their sidearms. They were going to have to kill someone after all. A man in overalls halted, terrified, at the foot of the stairs and raised his hands. Instead, Ronneberg clicked his lighter open and lit the fuse, then turned to the civilian. "Run for your life." They all took flight instantly, flinging themselves through the open door into the yard. Outside, Kirsten could see several of the others emerge from hiding. As she reached the fence, the sound of the detonations reached her, and she glanced over her shoulder. The flashes of light in the basement windows showed the explosives had all gone off, but the series of dull thuds seemed too weak. She had expected elation at the completion of the mission, but felt only confusion. Even escape lacked drama, for astonishingly, no one pursued them. Only when they'd thrown themselves into the descent, slipping and scrabbling over the icy rocks, did they hear the siren. Someone had finally sounded the alarm. But now at the bottom of the gorge, they faced an obstacle just as frightening as a squadron of guards. The ominous rise in temperature they'd sensed on their way to the target had grown worse during the action. The river was now in that terrifying middle stage between frozen and liquid. Sheets of white ice, separated by thin lines of black water, jostled against one another, forming a deadly moving mosaic. A new sound mixed with the sirens, the cracking of ice and the gurgling of water as forced up between the slabs. Sheer necessity drove them across, sometimes stepping upon a floe wide enough to hold them, sometimes falling to their knees when it broke in half and they had to clamber to the next block. Kirsten lost her balance as the slab supporting her tilted suddenly, and one leg slid into the freezing water. She drew it up, shocked by the burning cold, and struggled on hands and knees from one ice floe to the next one. Then she noticed Marit was nowhere in sight.
Oh my goodness. That is one intense read right there, Justine. I can imagine that the entire novel is quite a ride.
Well, yes, and it's what is moving is the knowledge that it all happened.
Right, and then that backdrop being so authentic as well. Well, thank you so much for your reading. I'm the last reader today, and mine's quite a contrast to Justine, just a little bit lighter. I'll be reading from Two to Tangle, which is book 2 in the Tangle Valley romance series. And it's the story of Chef Gabriella, who is opening up a restaurant on the grounds of the vineyards, and Ryan Jacks, who is the very slick contractor who is building the restaurant, who was also known to be quite the player about town. And Gabriella doesn't have a whole lot of time for players in her life. But on this particular scene, it takes place out at the ballpark because Ryan and Gabriella play for rival teams, the Otters and the Muskrats, which is pretty intense, and certainly adds some tension. And so they're both happen to be at the ballpark when their teams are playing other teams. Well, look which otter the cat dragged in, Gabriella said. The game had ended and the Muskrats improved their record. They were stepping it up this season, Ryan thought, and Gabriella was a big part of that momentum. I'm just scoping out the future competition, Ryan said. She gave Gabriella's bill an affectionate shake. You looked great out there. Your swing had me envious. She shrugged. Mine lacks follow-through. I can give you some pointers if you want, Gabriella said. Ryan liked the idea, her face heating like an idiot. She didn't give a damn. I'd love it. It's not bad. I was watching it earlier today. A little low, but I think it's a hips thing giving you trouble too. How do you know so much about softball? Ryan asked, squinting. Gabriella had taken her hat off and let her long hair down. It was a little wild from being kept up through the game, and now that translated into unencumbered and sexy as hell. It's something to do in Jersey to stay out of trouble. She shrugged. I've always been kind of a rule follower. It suits you, the rule following, Ryan said. Ha, says a non-rule follower. Ryan made sure to appear shocked, confused, and offended, none of which she was. You don't know that. Oh, please, Gabriella said with a laugh. Speeding tickets? Oh, I get out of those, Ryan said simply. Because of the way you look. Because of my charm? Oh, trust me, it's both. Doesn't mean you didn't break the damn law. Ryan widened her eyes. You're swearing at me now. It's getting serious. Gabriella held her gaze. Yeah, maybe. Gabriella's game had been the last of the night, and most of the crowd had shuffled out of the complex. The snack bar window had closed, and they were alone in the side field. So, what about that swing? Ryan asked, reminding them of the mission at hand. Gabriella straightened all back to business now. Show me your stance. Ryan picked up a bat, faced the front as if preparing for a pitch. She felt Gabriella's gaze on her, and that had an effect on a lot of things. It's here, Gabriella said, touching Ryan's hip. Ryan rolled her lips in at the contact. She experienced a recognizable stirring in her lower body, shoved it to the side, remained still, attempting to listen. Gabriella moved behind Ryan, her body close and her voice quiet. If you just adjust your hips back a bit, like this, you'll level more force into your swing. But you got to keep your follow through. Hips back, follow through, Ryan repeated. Let's see. Ryan blinked, still recovering from the moment prior. Gabriella's hands on her hips, the heat of her body from behind. Right, the swing. She took a moment to reset her stance, hips back as instructed, and swung through. Yes, like that, see? Gabriella said, clapping. It's subtle, but it really will make a difference. Ryan grinned, straightening. I have to point out to you that you just handed your opponent a much stronger hitter. Gabriella pointed at her face, which was steely and focused in a near glare. Do I look nervous? You look beautiful, Ryan said without pause. I'm not sure there's much you could do to change that. Gabriella's lips parted slightly at the compliment she didn't seem to expect. Charmer. No. Ryan shook her head seriously. Sometimes I'm charming. Tonight I'm just me. Gabriella looked skyward, and a moment later Ryan understood why. The first drop of rain hit her arm, the second her shoulder. Gabriella frowned. Uh-oh. The word had barely fled her lip before the heavens opened up in a full-on storm. Whoa, Ryan said, wincing with the assault of huge drops. Gabriella let out a little scream, followed by a laugh. Get your stuff, hurry! They scrambled with hats and bat bags and gloves, but it was too late to save themselves, and they both knew it. The rain had drenched them in a matter of seconds, and they laughed their way in defeat to the parking lot, hopping into Ryan's truck for shelter. With soaked clothes and wet hair and faces, they looked at each other in shock. That was not supposed to happen, Gabriella said, still laughing, because what else could they do? Oregon for you. Are you drenched? Gabriella nodded, pulled her yellow wet shirt away from her skin as rain pelted the windshield with force. Beyond. Yeah, me too. Ryan attempted to see through the glass with little success. We should maybe wait for a few, see if Mother Nature leaves us a window to escape. Gabriella looked over at her. You played great today, she said quietly. Ryan faced her. You too, that line drive you caught? She shook her head, remembering the little hop that had propelled Gabriella into the air. You continue to shock me out there. Why is that? I don't know. Girls I crush on don't tend to be such badasses. They're nice enough and smart enough, but you dominate everything you do, it seems. Gabriella blinked. You have a crush on me? Please, you know I do. Then Ryan realized something. She'd insinuated as much, but maybe had never said the words out loud. I knew you liked to flirt with me, but they're different. Ryan exhaled slowly, realizing that she was now wading into deeper waters. Didn't matter. Here went nothing. Like I said, I think about you a lot. You're fun to be around and you call me on my bullshit. You're friendly and warm and confident and so beautiful that when you walk into a room, everything just stops. And she didn't get to finish because Gabriella's lips were on hers and the world skidded to a glorious and mystifying pause. Gabriella had leaned across the center of the cab and caught Ryan's mouth, pressing her soft and surprisingly warm lips to Ryan's. Just as Ryan had a chance to absorb what was happening, Gabriella pulled back an inch, met her eyes briefly before going back in, this time determined and hungry and hot as hell. Right, that's the end. So I think we got a little bit of everything when we kind of put all those readings together. It's such a nice contrast to hear everybody's work in order like that. And we do have a few minutes, so I want to encourage our audience to, this is the time to drop any questions, either for the authors themselves or about the readings or the releases, and we'll be happy to cover that. But I do have a couple that I'd like to start off with, if that's okay. And I want to just talk about this specific release that you read from and just ask you what inspired the book. Where did the idea come from? And I think Andrews and Austin, I'll toss this question out to you first, if that's okay. What was the impetus?
Well, we live on a ranch and we have actually tried to buy the property next to us. And so many crazy idiots have already beat us to it.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. And so we sort of just laid the groundwork. You know, a lot of our writing comes from experience, from different things that we've done during our life, and from executive to ordinary talent that I was. And we compiled everything together to make characters we think might be interesting.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I would
Anything to add to that?
No, no. I always say I'm lazy. I don't want to research a career I haven't done. So it's so much easier if you have done that thing or something ancillary to it.
But you've done so many careers.
Well, that's because we're older. You'd be dead.
I didn't know that.
You didn't believe. But you know, we've done everything from being executives in the ad business and entertainment, and we own a ranch, and I was almost a minister, a priest, and I mean all these different things. So it's just there. You just have to pull it
a lot
out.
of experience.
Yeah, so you have a lot of options to draw from, and when they always say, write what you know, so that's exactly what you're doing,
you know,
which is fantastic. Yeah. Justine, what about you? What was it, an interest in this particular story?
Well, of course, I wanted to write another war novel, but I've been missing snow. We don't have much winter left in Europe. And I really, I have a passion for snow, and I decided to go to where there was snow. I went with a friend to Finland. And there was snow like I had never experienced in my life, snow to my hairline. And I met Sami, the Laplanders, they call themselves Sami. And I saw reindeer. And I had in the back of my mind that I might want to write about Sami because I like the little costumes they wear. But I for sure wanted to write about snow. And even though the novel doesn't show much about it, the reading doesn't show much about it, the novel is really about war, the Sami, lesbians, and snow.
Quite the combo too, and I think you've dressed the part for us too. You've got the snow on your sweater.
Oh yeah,
there,
yeah,
which
right.
works.
Right.
All right, so Maggie, what was the thought process behind Bulletproof that got you to write the book?
Well, I have worked as a detective for a number of years, or I was previously was a detective, and you know, I think that I don't really watch a lot of like police procedurals, although I have seen them. And then I was kind of just like, I sort of stayed away from writing. I do think it's important to write what you know, but I tried to stay away from writing exactly what I know. But I have done a lot of the things that are in this book in terms of like kind of like some undercover work and sort of really getting into the mix. And I wanted to kind of, police work in general is very boring a lot of times, where detective work is. It really isn't.
Not to us.
Exactly. So I kind of wanted to live that a little bit, live just the exciting parts. And so I got to do that in sort of writing a book. And so that's kind of just what I did and sort of went with it. It was a lot of fun.
I was waiting. You know, you've always been firmly in the romance lane, and you still are, of course, but I was waiting for a little bit of that cop life to kind of bleed over, and until I saw this release, I thought, okay, and we're there. And I find your job very exciting, so I don't care what you say.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Jane, what about you? What brought you to this particular story?
Well, I'm a big historical romance reader, and my favorite historical romance author is Eloisa James.
Yes.
And she writes a lot of Georgian and a lot of Regency historicals, and they're all brilliant. And one of my favorite things that she does is that she'll often have inspiration from like a very specific kind of contemporary reference. Like she did one series that was kind of based on Little Women, and then she had one series that was based on Desperate Housewives, one on Sex and the City. And so I was reading through her work, and I had wanted to pick up writing again myself. Like I had written a little bit earlier, like never got anywhere with it, and had been kind of mulling around ideas to write historical fiction myself. But I was reading her work and I was thinking, like, you know what I really would have loved? I would have loved if Eloisa James had written a series based on the L word. So that's how this came about. This was my attempt.
So it's like the perfect matchup of both things to put together.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, for me, I think putting a series on a vineyard was only a matter of time, because it's always a setting that I have found incredibly romantic. I don't know if you all out there have done any wine tasting, or there's just something about the landscape and the scenery and the wine that just lends itself so naturally to a romantic story. And so I think it was a ticking clock for me about settling on a series that takes place on a specific vineyard. And so it's been a lot of fun for me to write. And of course, with this particular book having to do so much with food and the restaurant, it just goes hand in hand. And I'm a big foodie, and I love to try anything and everything I can get my hands on. So it was a labor of love to get to research wine and food together. I do see, let's see if we have any questions here. This is a question for Justine. Justine, how do you do your research? Your writing is so authentic. It's clear you know your subjects through and through. So Justine, a question about research.
Almost always I talk to people who have experienced it or their parents did. I almost always, when I can, I go to the location. If it's been in Scandinavia or Germany or France or England, I can go there. I was not able to go to Russia for the Stalingrad novel, and I will one day, even though the novel's been out for a long time. I talk to real people. I want real stories, even though I fictionalize them and I lesbianize them, of course. But I want them all to be real. So I just track down the people.
Yeah, and I think you seem to be a very thorough researcher from what we've seen from your historicals. And Jane, I'll toss that question to you as well, because I know you had I believe you said you had a bit of a costumer background, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm sure there's some research went into this particular book.
Oh, I have both a degree in history, mostly early modern England, and I have a degree in fashion design / costume for theater. And so those are two big passions of mine, and I was really excited to kind of put them together in historical romance. So I love research. Like I mostly read biographies, and there's a few there are like a few primers like on 1800s England. Like it's great because there's so many books now about love in the Jane Austen era or fashion in the Jane Austen era. Like it seems to be like a big sell through these days. So I would recommend any of those. If you see Jane Austen in the title, it's usually a pretty good read.
Yeah, it's pretty popular topic these days, it seems. So
Very
so
much
that
so.
that bodes well for sure. And so Maggie, I know that you live in this world that you've created to a certain extent, but did you have to pull in any of your colleagues or your friends for any research, or was it just kind of there and innate?
Well, I mean, I have like colleagues that I talk to or former colleagues that I talk to just because we're friends. And so there's one in particular that whose brain I picked quite a lot. I centered this book around a narcotics ring, and I haven't really worked a whole lot of narcotics in my life. And I
Mhm.
sort of did that by design, but I didn't really want to take anything that I had actually worked on because I thought that I don't think I would represent it well. I think sometimes when you're too close to something, it just doesn't come out right. But there were sort of nuances that I needed to get right. So there were people whose brains I picked on, things like that. And a lot of it is changing so much. I mean, I was referencing a lot of stuff that I've done maybe 10 years or so ago. And then I would think to myself, well, I'm not even real sure that this is the way that's done anymore. I'm mostly in an office now. So I did do some research even to make sure I tried to get it as the right way, you know?
Yeah, and you seem to have great access to it, so that's helpful as well.
I'm lucky, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. And Andrews and Austin, in terms of research, was it just something, you talked about wanting to buy the ranch itself, so it's something you lived a little bit, but was there anything you had to look up?
Well, we know about horses, we know about ranching, but we certainly have never been cutting horse people. So we asked around because, of course, we're in the reddest state on the planet
Mhm.
and very conservative, right-wing, highly religious. So I'm thinking, how do we really do this in our area? And we found somebody who put us on to a cutting horse person who'd won a lot of cutting horse events. But it had kind of a funny twist because the individual got very excited that we were writing a book about this. And oh my God, that it was a romance and blah, 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 because she had a grandmother who wrote heterosexual romances and she thought we
Ah,
were going. And so she wanted to know if she could read pieces of it. And I'm very caught, right? Like, oh my gosh, where do I begin this conversation? That it's not exactly your grandmother's cutting horse thing, So,
We twisted it around.
yeah. So yeah,
you made it work.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. We're at the end of our time, so I want to take a moment to thank all of you for attending and joining us today, but also to thank my fellow authors for their fantastic readings and answers to these questions. It was such a great combination of different genres and different types of reads, so I think it was fantastic. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Hi.
Bye.
Bye.